The universal problem. Professor Kael'rith pressed all 6 of his manipulator limbs against the holographic display, frustration radiating from his crystalline form. The equation floating before him had stumped the greatest minds in the galactic mathematical union for 3 centuries. It was elegant, beautiful, and completely unsolvable. "It mocks us," he said to his research partner, a floating consciousness named Vexel who existed as patterns of light in a containment field. The convergence equation holds the key to faster-than-light communication across galactic clusters, yet every species that attempts to solve it goes mad or gives up. Vexel pulsed with colors indicating agreement. 47 species have tried. All have failed. The mathematics required exist beyond our comprehension, variables that shift based on quantum observation, constants that change with the observer's consciousness state. It's as if the universe itself refuses to be understood at this level. The convergence equation had been discovered carved into the surface of an ancient moon orbiting a dead star. No one knew who left it there, but preliminary analysis suggested it could revolutionize galactic civilization. Instant communication across billions of light years. Coordination between species separated by impossible distances. An end to the isolation that plagued expanding civilizations. If only someone could solve it. "We need a new perspective," Kael'rith said, his crystalline body refracting light in patterns indicating deep thought. "A mind that approaches problems differently than ours." "You're suggesting we consult the humans," Vexel said, colors shifting to skeptical purple. "Why not? They've surprised us before. They're barely a level 2 civilization. Their mathematics is primitive, their understanding of quantum mechanics childlike. What could they possibly offer?" Kael'rith manipulated the display, showing humanity's file. "They have something we lack, creativity born from chaos. They evolved on a death world where survival meant adapting constantly, thinking laterally, finding solutions where none should exist. Their mathematics is primitive because they developed it independently, without our guidance. That might be exactly what we need. The human solution." Dr. Sarah Chen received the summons to the Galactic Mathematical Union headquarters with equal parts excitement and terror. She was a 32-year-old mathematician from Earth, specializing in chaos theory and nonlinear dynamics. She'd published papers that caught attention in academic circles, but she'd never imagined being invited to the most prestigious scientific institution in the known galaxy. The headquarters existed in a pocket dimension, accessible only through quantum gates. Sarah stepped through and found herself in a space that hurt to look at, geometry that bent in impossible ways, colors that shouldn't exist, and the constant background hum of a trillion calculations happening simultaneously. Professor Kael'rith greeted her, his translated voice warm despite his alien appearance. "Dr. Chen, thank you for coming. We have a problem that may benefit from your unique perspective." "Unique perspective?" Sarah asked, still trying to adjust to the overwhelming sensory input. "You're human," Vexel said bluntly, appearing as a swirl of orange light. "Your species approaches problems differently than any other we've encountered. Sometimes recklessly, often inefficiently, but occasionally brilliantly." Kael'rith led her to the main chamber where the convergence equation floated in holographic glory. Sarah stared at it, her mind automatically trying to parse the symbols. Some were familiar, basic mathematical operators, quantum variables. But others were completely alien, and the way they interacted made her head spin. "This equation has defeated our best minds for 3 centuries, Kael'rith explained. It requires solving for variables that change based on the observer's consciousness, while simultaneously accounting for quantum superposition across multiple dimensional frameworks. Every attempt to solve one part collapses the others." Sarah walked around the equation, viewing it from different angles. Her colleagues back on Earth had always said she had a gift for seeing patterns others missed, for finding connections in chaos. But this was beyond anything she'd encountered. "Can I ask a stupid question?" she said after several minutes of silence. "There are no stupid questions in mathematics," Kael'rith replied kindly. "Why are you trying to solve it all at once?" The 2 alien mathematicians exchanged looks, or whatever passed for looks between their species. Because it's a unified equation, Vexel said slowly, as if explaining to a child. All parts are interconnected. Solving one section requires solving all sections simultaneously. Right, but that's assuming the equation wants to be solved that way, Sarah said, her mind racing. What if it's not one problem but multiple problems disguised as one? What if the trick isn't solving it, but breaking it apart first? Impossible, Vexel stated flatly. We've analyzed the structure. It's fundamentally unified. But Kael'thas's crystalline form was refracting light in curious patterns. Continue, Dr. Chen. Sarah approached the holographic display, her fingers moving through the symbols. On Earth, we have puzzles called Gordian knots, problems so complex that the only solution is to cut through them rather than untangle them. You're trying to untangle this equation. What if we need to cut it? You're suggesting we break the equation? Vexel's colors shifted to incredulous red. That would invalidate the entire structure. Or, Sarah said, getting excited, it would reveal that the structure was an illusion all along. Look here, this quantum observer variable. You're treating it as a constant within each solution attempt. But what if it's meant to be iterative? What if we solve for it last, after separating all the other components? She began manipulating the display, her human intuition guiding her where alien logic had failed. She wasn't following traditional mathematical protocols. She was treating the equation like a puzzle, looking for the pieces that didn't quite fit, the joints where it could be separated. This is madness, Vexel muttered. You're violating every principle of unified field mathematics. Maybe that's the point, Kael'thas said softly. Maybe this equation was designed to be unsolvable using conventional logic. Dr. Chen, continue. For the next 6 hours, Sarah worked with an intensity that amazed the alien observers. She broke the equation into 17 separate components, each one solvable using different mathematical frameworks. Some required quantum mechanics, others topology, still others pure number theory. It was like she was seeing the skeleton beneath the equation's skin, the hidden architecture that had been obscured by complexity. There, she said finally, stepping back. Try solving it now. Each component independently, then feed the results into the quantum observer variable as a final synthesis step. Kael'thas and Vexel worked together, their advanced computational abilities far exceeding Sarah's. They solved each component in sequence, their excitement building as pieces that had seemed impossible began falling into place. And then, with a sound like reality itself sighing in relief, the convergence equation resolved. The answer hung in the holographic display, beautiful, elegant, and impossibly simple now that they could see it. It was a roadmap to galactic cluster-scale communication, using principles that were within reach of current technology. The aliens had been so focused on the complexity that they'd missed the simplicity hidden within. By the crystalline gods, Kael'thas whispered. It's perfect. Vexel's colors cycled through emotions Sarah couldn't interpret. But how? How did you see what we couldn't? Sarah smiled tiredly. You were thinking like mathematicians. I was thinking like a human, messy, intuitive, willing to break rules I didn't fully understand in the first place. Sometimes the answer isn't in following logic perfectly. It's in being illogical enough to try something that shouldn't work. The recognition. News of the solution spread through the galactic academic community like wildfire. Dr. Sarah Chen, human mathematician, had accomplished what 3 centuries of effort by the galaxy's greatest minds could not. The implications were staggering. But as Sarah prepared to return to Earth, Kael'thas approached her with concern refracting through his crystalline form. Dr. Chen, there's something you should know. We've discovered 47 other unsolved equations in our archives, all similar in structure to the convergence equation. Problems that have stumped us for millennia. And we believe they're connected, pieces of something larger. Larger how? Sarah asked. We think they're instructions, Vexel said, appearing beside them. A message from whatever ancient civilization left the convergence equation. And if you could solve the first one, perhaps you can solve the others. Sarah looked at the display showing the other equations. Each one was more complex than the last, building on principles that made her head hurt just to glimpse. It would take years, decades maybe, to work through them all. "I'm just one person," she said. "I'm not even the best mathematician on Earth." "No," Calrith agreed. "But you represent something we lack, a mind trained by chaos, shaped by a world where nothing makes sense until you force it to. The humans call it thinking outside the box. We didn't realize how valuable that was until now." Sarah thought about Earth, about her quiet office and simple life. Then she thought about the mystery before her, about ancient messages written in mathematics that might explain the deepest secrets of the universe. "I'll need resources," she said. "And I'll want to bring other human mathematicians into this. If human perspective is what solves these problems, we should use more of it." "Agreed," Vexal said, colors shifting to respectful gold. "The Galactic Mathematical Union will provide whatever you need." As Sarah began assembling her team back on Earth, none of them realized what they'd truly discovered. The equations weren't just mathematical puzzles. They were a test. And humanity had just passed the first stage. The pattern emerges. 6 months after solving the convergence equation, Sarah Chen stood before a holographic display showing all 48 equations simultaneously. Her team of 12 human mathematicians had solved 32 of them, and a pattern was emerging that both excited and terrified her. "They're coordinates," said Dr. James Park, her colleague specializing in astrogation mathematics. "Each equation, when solved, produces a set of spatial coordinates. But they're not pointing to locations in our galaxy, they're pointing beyond it." Sarah nodded, exhausted but unable to stop. The human team had been working almost non-stop, taking breaks only when their alien hosts insisted. What drove them wasn't fame or recognition, but pure curiosity, the same trait that had pushed humanity to explore their death world despite all its dangers. Professor Calrith entered the workspace, his crystalline form refracting concern. "Dr. Chen, you should rest. Your species requires more sleep than most." "We're close to something, Professor," Sarah replied. "These last 16 equations are different from the others. They're not just harder, they're designed differently, like they're protecting something." "Perhaps that's a warning," Vexal suggested, appearing as cautious purple light. "In our archives, we found references to ancient civilizations that left knowledge too dangerous for younger species. What if these equations are locked for a reason?" "Then why leave a test that humans could pass?" asked Dr. Maya Rodriguez, the team's youngest member at 24. "Why create something specifically solvable by chaos-based thinking if you didn't want someone with that kind of mind to find the answer?" It was a good question, one that kept Sarah awake at night. The equations seemed designed with humans in mind, or at least, designed for minds that approached problems with creative chaos rather than pure logic. But why? The truth hidden in numbers. The breakthrough came during week 27, when Sarah's team wasn't even trying to solve an equation. They were simply playing with the numbers, looking for patterns the way humans do, seeing shapes in clouds, finding faces in random noise, forcing meaning onto chaos. "Wait," Dr. Chen Wu said suddenly. "Look at the solved equations' answers. If you arrange them not by the order we solved them, but by their numerical value." She manipulated the display, rearranging the solutions. Suddenly, a three-dimensional map appeared, not of space, but of time. "It's a timeline," Sarah breathed. "Each equation marks a moment in galactic history. And the unsolved ones, they're marking events that haven't happened yet." Calrith's crystalline form went completely still, which Sarah had learned meant he was shocked. "That's impossible. Precognitive mathematics doesn't exist." "Maybe not for you," Dr. Park said. "But humans have always been good at pattern recognition, at seeing connections between things that shouldn't be connected. What if that's exactly what these equations need? Not calculation, but intuition?" They worked through the night, approaching the remaining equations not as mathematical problems but as temporal puzzles. Sarah stopped trying to solve them logically and instead let her intuition guide her, following hunches that made no mathematical sense but felt right. One by one, the equations fell. And with each solution, the timeline became clearer. It showed the rise and fall of civilizations across billions of years. It showed moments of triumph and tragedy, of species reaching for the stars and falling back to their homeworlds. And at the end, it showed something that made Sarah's blood run cold. "There's a convergence point," she said quietly. "A moment approximately 200 years from now when something happens to every civilization in this galactic cluster simultaneously." "What kind of something?" Dexel asked, color cycling through concerned oranges and reds. "The equations don't say specifically. But every solution points to the same temporal coordinates, the same moment when all these timelines collapse into a single event. It's like the entire galactic cluster is moving towards something inevitable." The final equation. The 48th equation stood alone, more complex than all the others combined. Sarah's team had been staring at it for 3 weeks, trying every approach they knew. It refused to yield. "It's different," Dr. Rodriguez observed. The other equations tested different aspects of human thinking, creativity, intuition, lateral problem solving. "This one feels like it's testing something else." "Wisdom," Sarah said suddenly. "It's testing whether we're wise enough to solve it." She'd been thinking about this for days. The equation's structure suggested it could be solved, the pieces were all there. But something about it felt wrong, like a trap set for the unwary. "What if," she said slowly, "the correct answer is not to solve it?" The room went silent. Even the alien observers seemed stunned. "That's absurd," Dexel protested. "The entire point of this exercise is to solve the equations." "Is it?" Sarah challenged. "Or is the point to teach us something? Every equation so far has taught us about ourselves, about how human thinking differs from the galactic norm. What if this final equation is teaching us about restraint?" She approached the holographic display, studying the equation's structure. "Look at what it's asking for, calculations that would require us to manipulate quantum states across the entire galactic cluster simultaneously. If we solved this, if we actually implemented the solution, we'd be affecting trillions of lives without their consent or knowledge." "You think it's a test of our ethics," Kael'rith said, understanding dawning in his translated voice. "I think whoever left these equations wanted to know if the species that solved them had the wisdom to know when to stop. And I think the answer humanity should give is, we've learned enough." Dr. Park stepped forward. "But what about the convergence point? What about the event 200 years from now?" "Maybe that's for future generations to worry about," Sarah replied. "We've been given knowledge, the coordinates, the timeline, the warning. But the final equation would give us power, the ability to influence events on a scale no species should have. I think refusing that power is the real test. The choice. The decision whether to solve or leave the final equation unsolved sparked fierce debate within Sarah's team and throughout the Galactic Mathematical Union. Some argued they had a responsibility to pursue all knowledge. Others agreed with Sarah's caution. In the end, the vote was nearly unanimous. Humanity would leave the 48th equation unsolved, preserved in archives with a warning about its potential dangers. Admiral Shin of Federation Command spoke at the closing ceremony. "Dr. Chen and her team have given us an unexpected gift. Not just the solutions to 47 impossible problems, but a reminder that wisdom sometimes means knowing what questions not to answer." Sarah stood with her team, feeling proud but also oddly sad. Part of her desperately wanted to know what that final equation would reveal. But she'd learned something important through this process. Humans weren't just good at solving problems, they were also good at knowing when to stop. As the ceremony concluded, Kael'rith approached Sarah privately. "There's something you should know. We've detected a transmission from deep space, repeating every 48 hours. It's in the same mathematical language as the equations." "What does it say?" Sarah asked. "We don't know yet. But the preliminary analysis suggests it's a congratulations message. Whoever left these equations has been watching, and they're pleased with how humanity handled the test." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "They're still out there?" "Apparently. And based on the transmission's origin point, they're approximately 53 million light-years away, far beyond our current reach. But they're aware of us now, aware of humanity specifically. Because we solved their equations? No, Kael'rith said, his crystalline form refracting something that might have been awe. Because you were wise enough not to solve them all. Because when faced with ultimate power, humanity chose restraint. That's apparently very rare in the galaxy. The legacy. Years later, long after Sarah had returned to Earth and resumed a quieter life teaching mathematics, she received a message from the Galactic Mathematical Union. The equations had been studied by thousands of species, and a consensus had formed. Humanity's approach to mathematical problems, chaotic, intuitive, willing to break rules, had revolutionized galactic academia. More importantly, the lessons encoded in the equations had sparked a philosophical revolution. Species across the galaxy were reconsidering their approaches to knowledge and power, asking themselves what humanity had instinctively understood: just because we can solve a problem doesn't mean we should. Sarah stood in her backyard, watching the night sky. Somewhere out there, 53 million light-years away, someone or something was watching humanity, judging whether they were ready for the next test. She smiled. Let them watch. Humanity had proven something important, not that they were the smartest species or the most logical, but that they understood something fundamental about the universe. Sometimes the most advanced mathematics isn't about finding the answer. It's about knowing which questions to ask, which problems to solve, and which mysteries to leave alone. And in a galaxy full of species who pursued knowledge at all costs, that wisdom made humanity not just unique, but valuable in ways no one had anticipated. The stars twinkled overhead, full of equations waiting to be solved and problems waiting for that special human combination of chaos and wisdom to crack them open. Sarah went inside, leaving the mysteries of the universe for another day. After all, some things were worth solving slowly, carefully, with the patience that came from knowing that not everything needed to be understood right now. That, perhaps, was the most human approach of all.